We have two primary activities left to deal with regards to the DAO layer, and that is inserting gender into the database and a picture, which is actually just a var binary column in the employee table in the database, but it's an image, or I should say a picture, in the value object. Let's take a look at the employee value object, which is actually an array of bytes. Okay, and that's actually, if you're going to transfer stuff over the network, I found that this to be the most reliable way to do it. If you're going to, and this goes for anything, right? So let's say you have a picture or a Microsoft Word document or any type of anything, right? If you can convert that thing to an array of bytes, you can send that array of bytes any place. Okay. The person value object defines an enumeration called sex, and sex is used to define a property or a field called gender, and then of course that field is used to define a property called gender right here. But I went looking in the database, and let me pull the database over, and we don't, at least I don't, see a gender field in this database. I didn't notice that throughout this series of videos. So this is actually a great opportunity to modify the database scripts and rerun them, drop the database, recreate the database, okay, and add the gender field. Now, instead of creating a whole nother release of these scripts, I'm going to just go ahead and shut that Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio session down. So now here I have the scripts. Here's the original create table. This is in the release 1 folder. I say this because all this code is going to be up on the GitHub repository, so you certainly have access to it. So the create table has an employee ID. You could add it here if you wanted to, but I will go to alter table employee, and let's see, create tables. Well, before I make that decision, let's go to the folder. So I have an insert test data here. Let's see what it looks like. Well, maybe I'll just modify the original create table. That's probably what I'll do. I'll modify the original create table script. And the reason why is then I'll just add the test data here. I could also put a default value for that field. So let's actually do that. And then I won't have to modify anything. I'll give it a default value of male. I guess if I was a woman doing this, I'd probably say female. So sorry about that, gals who are listening to this video. But programmer prerogative on this one. So I think, give me 1 second. I'm going to pause the video and make sure I know how to do that in SQL. And that's probably the easiest way to solve this problem. I'll be right back. And I'm back. Seems pretty easy, so I will just add the gender column here. Gender. And it will be a varchar. And it will just be a single varchar, M or F. I'll put 1. I'll make sure it's not null. And I believe I just do this. Default. Give it a char of, I'll say male. And like that. Comma. because I have another field. Now, I'll drop the database, run this script, check the database to make sure it actually took, and then we can get on with coding the DAO. I'll save this. I'll open up a command prompt. I'll go to a cd:/deploy. cd scripts. Okay. Hope you guys can see that text. But what I want to do is I'm going to just drop the database and log in. Well, I'll just go ahead and create latest database. Let's try that. All right, while that runs, we can go check the scripts when it's finished. So let's take Notepad++, open it up and go File, Open. Now we're going to go up here to Scripts, into Logs, and we're looking for the Create Database Output text. And it just said change database context to master, which means that no error was thrown when we ran those scripts. Now let's go check the database. So I'm going to go back to SQL Server Management Studio, connect to the database. Expand databases, go to Employee Training, expand tables. I'm going to right click on Table Employee. Select top, I'll just say edit top 200 rows. That'll give me a default query for everything in the database or in the in that table. And I'm wondering why I'm not seeing it here. There it goes. Okay. It's a VM, so there's no telling what's going on. And it looks like we now have a column. The gender column is there with a default value. So that's pretty easy. That's the first time, quite honestly, I've used default values in a database. And after I did that research, I might start using that stuff even more. Now we see that our picture column has nothing but nulls in it because there is no picture database picture stuff. I might go modify the scripts one more time. I have all these annoying John Paul Joneses in there. I guess I was doing testing, right? So I'm going to remove a lot of the... I'm going to go to the test scripts and remove some of the John Paul Jones. Just leave them there. What the hell? Who cares? I have a zillion John Paul Jones. Maybe later I'll delete them. But anyway, we have the gender and we have the picture columns in our database. The gender has a default value of M and it's a single varchar field. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to modify the employee VO. Well, the employee VO has the gender. I mean, I'm saying the person VO has the gender. And the employee VO, because it inherits from person, also, has that gender field. But we have to modify the employee DAO in order to insert and retrieve the gender from the database and convert it into that enumeration type, because we're just storing a single character in the database, but the employee VO wants either male or female, and it has to be that type, sex, enumeration. So let's turn our attention now to the employee DAO. Here we are in our employee DAO class, and we'll start from the top. We have our SQL parameter constants, employee ID, first name, middle name, last name, birthday, yada, yada, yada. Let's add gender. Private, const, string. Another thing I've noticed while I'm typing this, right, is sometimes I use capital S and sometimes I use lowercase s for string. It doesn't really matter as long as it knows what it's doing, right? I suppose for consistency, I could change all these things to lowercase string. because I'm sure there's some people out there who are watching this video that are just seething with incredulity that I had the audacity to use a uppercase S for string. Now the difference is, right, what is the difference? S is an alias to system dot string, which is an object, which is a one of the fundamental reference types in the .NET type type framework. So string lowercase is a built-in type to C#, whereas the uppercase string is console, or not console, but system dot string. Okay, so that's really what the difference is, just in case you were wondering. So now let's get back to the business at hand. Gender. So now we're going to have to go modify the SQL string constants that we've created. These are the parameter constants. So we just needed to make sure we had a gender parameter constant that we could use down here. So now when we select all columns, we're going to have to add, I'll just add it to the end. That way I don't have to modify a bunch of different code. So I'll say gender. Okay. I'll come down here. Now when we insert an employee, I'll add it to the end as well. So I will say plus, oh, now we have this at the end, right? So I'll leave that right there. So I'll come at the end of username and I'll do this. So plus, right? Column, comma, space, plus, space, gender. And I also have to modify this right here. So insert into table. So that's the last parameter. And so I have to add gender there as well. Sometimes modifying the code can be as tricky as, or even more so tricky than just, you know, when you first code it. Okay, so continuing on. Now for the update as well, I'll do the same thing. I will, let's add a comma here. Otherwise we're going to screw ourselves. Gender equals, oops, let's line that up. Keep the alignment. This is our SQL parameter. Plus, now just an empty space there. Plus, actually, let me line that up. Plus. Save. Now let's scroll down and continue to look for the constructor is fine. The get all employees is fine. The insert employee. So now we have to add gender. Now this is where we are going to have to take into account the, so essentially what we're doing is we're converting one type to another. We're converting an enumeration, and the enumeration is sex, okay, which is defined on the person VO. We need to then check that and say, well, if it's a male, insert an M into the database. If it's a female, insert an F into the database. Okay, so one way to do it is with a switch case. And I'll go ahead and just copy instead of typing the whole thing in. So I'm coming down here underneath of username. Now, does it really make a difference other than readability? these add-in parameters could be inserted in any order because you're naming the parameter that you're putting them in. But like I said earlier, in another earlier part of this series, that I usually like to keep the order. So I will go ahead and paste the. So now we have a vo.gender. So we're going to switch on gender. And if it's person VO, actually, I think we can just leave this like this. Employee VO, sex male. Then we're going to database, add in parameter, command, gender, database type, string, M. If it's a female, case employee female, okay? And that should do it for... Now there's probably a more concise way to phrase that statement, but generally speaking, sometimes the brute force coding is the most straightforward to understand, right? Especially when you're just starting out with this stuff. I believe I could write this thing with like one line of code and make it more concise. But this pretty much explains what's going on. So I'm going to switch on gender on the VO that's coming in. If it's a male, I'm going to insert an M. If it's a female, I'm going to insert an F. Of course, all this is very nice to say until we actually start testing. The same has to be done for the update. So I'll just, since I made some modifications to the code, I will go ahead and create this. And come down here, come underneath of username, copy that in there, save. Now the rest of the methods are fine, but now we have to go modify our private method when we actually are filling in the VOs, right? So the list employees method is fine, but this method here, fill in employee VO, that will need to be modified. So username is 7. So I will have to, we'll have to get the string from 8. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop another switch in there. So I will put this right underneath of here. I will say EMP. Actually, I'll create a temporary variable, string, gender, equals, reader, dot, oops, get string, 8. Now the reason why 8, right, is because I put it after the username. So string gender equals reader.getString 8. Now we're going to get that string from the database, and then we're going to pop in this switch case. So we're going to switch on gender. Case M, employee VO gender equals. Now this is where we're going to convert from the single character into the type that the employee VO requires. Now we could have just use a single character in the employee VO, right? That's totally a design decision, right? But sometimes it's nice to see how, because there are enumerations out there, and sometimes you want to be able to represent those enumerations because it makes more sense, or it makes it easier to understand the design up in the front end, and then you want to convert those enumerations to simpler types for storage because you don't want to waste a lot of space in your database storing male and female. So MF. You could also did a bit like 1 or 2, 0, right? But you'd have to figure out what the coding is on that. Okay, so once we do that, we've modified the employee VO. Now we need to test, or the employee DAO. So let's turn our attention now. Interestingly enough, we don't have to modify any of the employee BO methods because they pretty much just take the employee VO. The only one that would need to be modified, is the overloaded insert employee, where we're taking first name, middle name, username. So what I would have to do here is add person. I'll say employee, person. I'll go employee. Dot sex. Right, because that's the type. And then I'll say gender. Okay, now down here I'd have to say VO. I'll put it underneath of, it doesn't really matter. VO dot gender equals gender. Okay, and now once we have the VO, we're just going to insert it into the database. So that's taken care of for us. And that's it. So we've modified now both the employee DAO and the employee business object to handle the insertion of gender. And when we get the objects back from the database, they will be populated and with the gender as well. So now we need to move to the presentation layer. So let's move to the presentation layer, and we can write up some code to test this and see if these modifications work. Here we are in the presentation layer in the main method of the program.cs file. First things first, let's run this application to see if everything that we've made changes to so far, the employee DAO, the employee BO, make sure we didn't dork anything up, or at least make sure I didn't dork anything up. Let me expand this output window so we can see the mistakes. And also too, it may compile fine, which it looks like it's doing. And it may, but you know, the proof is in the pudding, right? Once we start exercising those methods. So we'll see what happens here. If we don't get an exception, then I think we're good to go. So now let me hit any key to continue. Okay, so I think everything. I think that, oh, let me see. Did that work right? I'm scratching my head. Can you tell? I'm like, wait a second. Was that the way it's supposed to go? I mean, so the insert seems to work. Okay, so let's see. Now we should get it. We inserted a new employee. All right, because we delete it after each time. So we insert the new employee. We get Laura Richter 2. Hit any key to continue. Oops, I think it has to be a return. And then, okay, so yeah, that's just, it's just waiting for the input. So that looks like it ran fine. Now let's test the new method. So I'll go ahead and exit. Okay, let me go ahead and clear these console messages and move this window down. You hear the birds singing outside? I even have my door closed. That's how loud they are. Okay, so we're not, I did populate female. You know, I didn't notice. That's what I didn't notice, is let's run that again. Gosh, I'm such a dork. Okay. So when we get all the employees. So yeah, it says Laura, so it's right, it's working. So Laura Jean Richter is a female. So we tested both of them, right? So When we insert the employee, we go from the sex enumeration to the male or female, M or F, right? And then we do a get all employees. We pull back Laura Jean Richter. She's a female, and that means that the retrieve is working, right? The fill in VO, which we modified. So now we can do hit any key to continue. And then I guess we could check the update. So if we take a look here, we've got Corey Lee Miller is a male. Well, Corey Lee Miller is my wife. She's certainly not a male. And okay, so I can do an update on that record. So what I'll do is I need to get her, let's see, I need to get, I'm not, oh yeah, so her ID is 2, so let's see if I can't do an update. So I have this whole like list, right? So we essentially have a list. So what I want to do is, and Nancy Coates too, so she's a female. The rest are male. Okay, so I'll update 2 records here. See how that goes. So let's go ahead and exit out of this. Okay. Okay, we've exited out of there. Now, let's go ahead and let's do another query. So I will say employee list. Let's create list. List employee VO. So up to this point, right, we've only been doing this get all employees as part of the for each statement. So now I'm really just going to create me a quick little variable here inside the main method, employee list equals, and then employee BO, get all employees. So we're going to grab all the employees. Now, once we've done that, we can, I can probably just, I'll just do it too. So I know from the thing, right, that Corley Miller is 3, what was her? I think it was 3. Well, let's just try this, right? So I'm going to go employee list. You can access each object in an employee or in a list, right? So each of these objects in this list, right? These are generic types, are employee VO types. So I can say employee list Am I not spelling it right? List employee, EMPLOY underscore list equals, okay, employee list equals, that's not what I want. I got to think a little bit straighter here. Employee list, I'll do 3. Dot gender equals employee VO dot sex dot female. Okay, and let me see, employee. Well, the funny part about this is, right, is if I miss, see, hers was the second one, 3, 4, 5. Actually, you know what? It's not based on the record. It's based on the position within the array. So 0, 1, 2, and 3, 4. So in other words, we can treat these employee lists, even though a generic type, which is a collection, we can treat it like an array. Dot gender equals, and the only problem here is if we manage to set the sex on the wrong person, right? That doesn't matter because we're just having fun here. Now, so once we've made these changes, then we're going to go ahead and do this one more time. Actually, I'm going to do this. Repeat this whole thing. Come down here. And just to let me make sure I know that I'm done, I'm going to repeat this. And I'll say done. Right, done. Enter, return to exit. Well, that should clarify things a little bit when we run this. Okay, so let's... Oh, I haven't actually submitted the VOs to the back end. So I'm going to change this one, and then I'll call employee BO dot update employee, and I'll pass in employee list 2. Like that. And I'll do the same thing. I'll just copy this line of code to save some typing. And I'll say employee list 4. So 4. So now it actually updates. Then we're going to go get all the employees and we're going to see if the updates took. Now we run this once. If we run this once, we would have to go reset our database in order to, you know, run it again with the same values. Because as soon as we reset these gender properties on the database on these different objects, then they've been set, right? We'd have to set them back or do something different. This is why doing this type of stuff for this video and this demonstration, doing it in the application is fine for just demonstration purposes. But really, unit testing is where you should be doing all this stuff, right? Because then you can delete. So, okay. Now let's run this. Let's see what happens. So I've saved it. Let's run it. This will be a one-shot deal. And it will conclude the sex part, or the gender part, I should say, of this particular effort, making sure this worked. And then we can have some fun with the picture. Now, so, oh, she's 2. She wasn't 3. 0. That's 0, 1. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of here without running this whole thing. And then, oh, I needed to do Laura Jean Richter too. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3. So 2, 0, 1, 1, and 3. So let me just quit early without running the rest of the code. 0, 1, 0, 1, and 0, 3, 0, 3. That way we know what we're looking for. So anyway, we'll just do those two. Control save, and we'll start again. Compile it. Now let's make sure that the before values are male, and then once we do the updates. All right, let's see what it says here. Yeah, so all that, this is just the exception because we've already inserted Laura Jean Richter, right? So with that username, so we can't do another one. So that's fine. That's just tell us we're being idiots. So Corley Sylvia Miller is a male. Nancy Jo Coates is a male. Now, when I hit continue, we'll do an update. We'll do a delete on the last one that was inserted. That should probably return a, that might return a exception as well, since we weren't successful deleting that. Yep. So it actually threw an exception. Don't you just love live programming? Oh, wait a second. Did it? Yeah, it's an unhandled exception. So that's because there's nothing to delete, right? So when I try to delete that, oh, actually, it's an update. Let's see. So I'm doing an update. Oh, employee VO. This is in the employee BO. Unhandled exception. Let's continue. See what happens. Stop debugging. Continue. All right, let's go down to our errors and see if it propagated up. Okay, so I have an issue. Let me go fix my update. Oh, that's the problem right there. So this is where your exception. So the problem is I have a misspelling in a column name. So middle name is not valid. So let's go. I know where that's at. Let's go to the DAO. So we have to fix this little bit of testing. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop and recreate the database, make sure everything's good to go. So we're looking for a misspelled middle name here. So it must be in the update. Get employee list. We got to go up farther. Middle name. Oh, let's see here. Employee DAO. Okay, when I find it, I will come back. So I'm going to pause the video and look for that error. Okay, I found it. It's right here. So it's in the update constant, the SQL constant. If you look down here, it'll say middle name. That's the name of the column. So we got to change that. So command save. Now let's return to the database. I'm going to return to the database here. I'm going to pull up. I'm still in my script subdirectory. So now let's just go ahead and do this. There might be a connection. I might have to do this a couple times. Create the latest database. So you see how it hangs here with dropping employee training? That generally means that there's some other process that's got a hold on that thing. Okay, so eventually it may drop if it pauses there long enough, or you might have to do a Control-C to stop it. But what I like to do in this case is once it proceeds, I like to just drop it, just execute that script again until that thing does not hang. Okay, I might have to call the other script as well, dropping employee training. The acid test is once you run this script, if you go to the SQL Server Management Studio, and if the database is still up and running, or if you see this database still there, that means the drop was not successful. Okay, and then you can always go check your scripts. So the next thing I'm going to do is go here to, oh, you know why? Usually when you have a table like this open, if you close this and then return to the scripts. Let's do that one more time. Okay. Sometimes it takes a while for those connections to drop. And the application too could have an active connection to the database based on its last execution. So, okay. Let's go check the, let's refresh. So I'm going to refresh this here. Refresh. Databases. Okay, so employee training is still there. Drop it one more time. Okay, at that time, it did not sit there and pause on the drop. So this looks like it was a successful execution. So I'm going to refresh one more time. Refresh. Database employee training is still there. This is one of them. Let me just close that script. Close that script. I can close this. I'm going to work with this. Let's do dir. Drop database and login. So I'll say drop. Now, let's try that. Refresh. Databases. Okay, it's gone. Let's go ahead and run the recreate. Create latest database. Yeah, it should be there. Sometimes you get into the heat of battle and you forget like what you're doing. So whenever I drop and recreate the database will be back, right? So let me refresh this. Okay, so now the database is there. Let's go ahead and check the tables. So we'll do the employee table. We'll do edit top 200 rows. This time I'll make sure I shut that off. So we're back to where we were. There's no females, right? So let me just go ahead and shut that down. Now let me move the database VM out of the way. Let's return to the application presentation layer. And let's run this again. Now we should get no exceptions this time, because Laura Jean Richter with that username does not exist. And when we go to delete that record, it should also delete. Okay, takes a little while to crank up. All right, so here is the original data. Now we insert the new employee. Record number 20 is inserted. Let me go ahead and hit the any key. Okay, so then we delete record 20. Okay, so that worked fine. And then we set Corey Lee Miller to female and Nancy Jo Coates to female. So our gender is working both on the insert and the update. Okay. Because Laura Jean Richter was a female. That's how we can tell it worked on the insert right there. And that's it for the gender piece. So I hope you enjoyed this piece. That's what happens when you're doing when you're doing programming here. I could edit out the mistakes, but I think the mistakes are, you learn just as much with those as you do with all perfect code, right? So, all right, hope you enjoyed it. And the next section of this video, we'll talk about the picture. So we're going to insert some var binary data and have a little fun doing it. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Inserting the picture into the database, or I should say the byte array, is actually fairly straightforward. The most work needs to be done is taking an image, converting it into a byte array, and then assigning that to the employee VO. But once you've got that byte array in that object, then when you insert that into the database, essentially, you know, it's just like any other column in the database. There is one caveat. Having said that, we have to take a look at the database one more time, and instead of looking at through the lens of that, I might run these drop and create scripts one more time for this section, but let's take a look at the create. Let's see, let's take a look at the create table. Okay, so we have our picture here. This is our column. It's a var binary, and we can put as much in there as we want, which in reality, or in a real world situation, is probably not what you want. You'd probably want to limit the size of your image, right? And I'm just speaking in general here, not that this is a real world application, but the techniques that are used here can certainly be used in a real world app. Although sticking database or var binary data into the database is probably a good idea in some cases. Who knows with images, right? But if you want to have an employee picture and you want to stick that in the database, it's got to be put someplace, right? So here's where I'm sticking it. If you have a database of images, you might want those images on a file and then just have like a metadata that points to the location on file. That's another way to handle images in an application. But there's lessons to be learned here. The important part is this can be null, right? That's really the takeaway, is that all these other fields have to have something in them when they get written to the database, except for picture. Now, the ramifications of that is if we read the picture column from the database on a get, right, when we're retrieving employees, if that field is null, then we need to be able to handle that situation. So we need to be able to check for null. And that's the big takeaway. So having said that, let's take a look at the employee. I have my Visual Studio lined up here with employee VO selected, and picture, the picture property is simply just a field. The backing field is called _picture bytes, and it's simply just an array of bytes, okay, a byte array. So there's nothing really particular there. You just have to realize that whenever you're going to get and set the picture of an employee, you're going to have to convert that into some type of image, right, if you want to display a picture. So for the DAO, we already have the picture SQL parameter constant. We just need to add picture to the mix, right? So get busy here, and I'll go ahead and put picture. I'll retrieve the picture now that we're not doing it. So whenever we select all columns, we will grab picture. Okay, get that from the database. So I'm going to add that there. When we insert an employee, we will also insert. So let me just go ahead and do this. I'm going to copy from here to here. Command C. Okay. Actually, I'll do that. I guess I needed that concatenation operator. All right, so I'm adding picture here. So PIC, there we go. So I'm just like I did with gender in the previous segment. I'm just adding the picture field and the picture SQL parameter to the end of the these SQL strings in order not to dork around with the mix too much. Okay, so now private const string, that doesn't need to be modified. The update will need to be modified. So again, I'll just go ahead and add picture down here at the end. So we're going to update picture equals, I'll line up all the fields, and picture. Line up this, make sure, learning lessons from last time. And then a plus. And then I need to add a comma right here. Okay, so let me save that file. My wife's watching TV in the next room, so you might hear some bleed over noise from that. I apologize. All right. All right, so now we are inserting the picture at the end there. Now we need to go to the insert method. So picture might be null. Okay, so when we insert the employee VO into the database, we'll need to account for that. All right, so let's take a look at the code for the insert employee method. And I'm not going to type it all in, I'll just copy it. Okay. Coming right below the switch for the gender, I'll leave a space. All right, so I'm going to change the name of this. And I will say BO. Now I don't have a debug, which is just a variable. I think how I'll do this, I think what I'll do here is I will just log debug. So I already have that, right? So I'll say log debug. Or actually, I don't want to do debug. I'll do log info. I'll do log debug. Okay, inserting image. Just like that. That gives us a little bit of a trace. Now, this will be... Okay, I'll just go ahead and delete this. I'll just test on the front end instead of writing everything out to the console from the DAO. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to say if the VO picture is not equal to null, okay, which that's its default state if we haven't set it to any bytes. If we haven't populated the byte array, is what I'm trying to say. We will log debug, and then we'll do a database add in parameter, command, because there's our command, picture, and then the type is DB type binary, and then VO dot picture. Now you can see the code I wrote for testing, right? And that's it. So that little statement right there, that's not too bad. So command save here. Now we need to modify the update method. So let's go on down to update employee, and it'll essentially be the exact same thing. I'll just copy what I've modified up here. So if picture not equal to null, okay, I will come down here, leave a little space. If VO.picture is not equal to null, log debug inserting image, database add in parameter. Okay, so that looks fine for that. Let's move on down to delete employee. Don't have to mess around with delete employee. Now we will have to modify the fill-in employee because we're not currently handling the gender. I mean, well, we're handling the gender, but we're not handling the picture down here. So picture has been tacked onto the end, so it will be 9 since gender is 8. So let's move on down to that method. And essentially what we're going to do is, since the possibility exists in the database that that column may be null, we're going to have to do a check for null on the reader. So let's go ahead and I will paste that code in here and walk through it. So this is going to be column number 9. And employee, now this will be employee VO picture byte. Okay, so we're going to get the value and we're going to convert that to a byte array because we're getting a var binary from the database, and we want to just make sure that we got the right type on that picture. And then we'll return the VO, and that's pretty much it. This right here is probably the key, is DB null. So if that's how you would check any record, any column in the database, right? If there was a potential for a null value, you'd want to check to make sure that before you tried to access or set that you check to make sure it's not null before you proceed. Alrighty, so I think that is it. Let me just make another sweep through the code. And we'll find out soon enough for the DAO. So coming up here, gender, we got the picture. Let's go to the BO layer now. So we have our update employee. That's the first one. Well, that's the second one. Let's go up here. Delete employee. Now, insert employee, we need to add byte a byte array. You could do this a couple different ways since it's insert. You could take a picture here, but I'll do byte array. Okay. So picture, well, let me do this lowercase. Okay. We have picture. Now we come down here to VO dot picture. Now, since that's an incoming byte array, we're just going to set picture to picture. And then we insert the employee VO into the database. So that's where we're just passing through on that one. So now we can move on to the front end or the presentation layer and modify this application so that we can grab a picture from the computer. You know, we'll select an image. Well, I'll just pick one. I have one that's I'm going to upload into the repository, and we'll use that to update an employee. Well, we'll test an insert and an update to make sure everything's working fine. So let's go to the presentation layer. I'll start by showing you the picture I will insert for this test. Let me minimize Visual Studio. So here I have a picture of myself as it powers up here, and it's simply called rick.jpg. Okay, and that's located in the employee training up on the repository. In the employee training repository on GitHub, you have your database folder, DB connection test, and then an images folder. So that will be in the images folder. And then Visual Studio Solution, so that's where our application, so we will need to reach up into this images folder. Now on your computer, you may need to change the path. I'll try setting the relative path, but actually maybe that'll probably be a pain in the butt, simply because when this application executes, the execution path is in the bin like debug directory, which is kind of way down in the weeds. So I didn't realize I'd shut that off. So let me power Visual Studio back on again, and let's get going. So essentially, all we need to do from a high-level standpoint is create a picture, right? And convert it to bytes, essentially. And we're going to do that with the help of two classes that are in the .NET framework. One is an image, and the other one is a memory stream. And another class called bitmap. So all the heavy lifting is pretty much done for us. So I will go ahead and I'll do some of this stuff up here at the top. Let's see. So when I insert the new employee, I'll even try inserting a new employee. So this gal, Laura Jean Richter, will have my picture. I'll use the same picture for everything. Now, when it comes, since this is a console application, whenever we go through and list the employees, if they have a picture, it'll be like this long array of bytes, and it's 220K. I could have picked a smaller image, but we'll see how it turns out, right? It might look like an abomination in the console. But anyway, we'll see here. So I need to come up here first. I need to come to using. I might need to add a reference in the presentation layer if it can't find some of these classes. So I think I need using system.io. I'll see which ones I need, but I think I need these. System.drawing. Okay, using system.drawing imaging. That might be it. System.io, system.drawing, system.drawing.imag. All right, so using directive is unnecessary. Okay, well, we'll see what happens. Dot imaging. Well, it says it's unnecessary. We'll see. Maybe Visual Studio knows best, but let's see what happens when I try to use it. All right, system.drawing. So now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here and create, this is the main method. I'll just put these up here. I'll create an image. See, that's the whole thing, right? I'm looking for that image class. So system.drawing. I think I need to add another. So I'm going to pause the video and fix this issue and get right back to you. So hang tight. Okay, I'm back. Yes, so in order to use system.drawing, since this was created as a console app, you will need to add a reference. As you'll see here, I've expanded the references section in the presentation layer, and there is no system.drawing. So let me right-click, add reference. You want to select assemblies, scroll down. You can see the ones that are checked, and we come down to system.drawing. So system.deployment, system.drawing, right there. Hit OK. That will add that library. So now we have system.drawing right there. And now we can probably do using system.drawing.imaging. There we go. Now it's not squawking. Now I can do this. I can say image. There's our image type. And I will call that picture equals null. Oops. And the other, it says no need. That's valid. Okay, that's just a warning. It says I'm not using it yet, and that's fine. So memory stream. Memory stream ms equals null. Force a habit. Okay, so I'm going to line these up. No, I don't need to do that. So memory stream. So you need an image, right, and a memory stream, because what you're going to do, you also need the bitmap class, and we'll get that in a second. So lots of things can go wrong. So essentially, what we'll do is try. I'm going to wrap this in a try block. Try. And then catch exception E. And then I believe, let's see here. Well, I'll just throw E. Just like that. All right. That's because I have lack of imagination at this point. So the first thing I want to do is create the picture. I'm going to initialize the picture, which is the image, equals new bitmap. Okay, now this is where I want to minimize. Let me minimize Visual Studio. I'm going to go to Images, and then I'm going to click on the URL for that folder, copy, or the path, go back here, and then this will be a string, images/rick.jpg. Okay, so now we're going to create a bitmap, JPEG, using a JPEG. Initializing this image reference to that. Now, once we do that, we're going to then create the memory stream. That has to be successful first. So ms equals new memory stream. Okay. And once we have that, then we're going to take the picture, which is an image, and we're going to save it to the memory stream. Okay. Comma. And the image format, then we have to use the image format dot JPG. JPEG. All right, so we've saved that to the memory stream. And once we do that, then we're going to create a byte array. Well, we already have the, let's just do that up here. Let's do byte array. And I'll call this picture bytes. Let me spell right. Picture bytes equals null. So byte array picture bytes. Now down here we're going to say picture bytes equals memory stream dot toArray. So we're going to convert that. So these, it looks like these slashes, let's make this a, instead of escaping this, I'll make this a verbatim string. So a verbatim string, simply attach the @ sign to the beginning of the, in front of these double quotes, right? So that makes that a verbatim string, and these backslashes will be properly handled. That's a very important part of this, that verbatim string there. So if you see something like that in Visual Studio or IntelliSense telling you that these backslashes are not recognized in an ordinary string, you need a verbatim string. Okay, so memory, and now once we have all this, so picture bytes, okay. At this point, we can just take this picture bytes and we can assign it to whoever we want. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to come down here for the new employee, and I'm going to set employee dot picture equals picture bytes. I will come down here to the updates that we're doing. So for yeah, I'll just go ahead and set everybody with a picture. Well, just these three, and then we'll see what happens when it prints out. So employee, come up here. So employee list 1 dot picture equals picture bytes. You know, so if you were working on this, right, you would have a graphical user interface, and then you'd select the picture. I go into this in my book, ASP.NET, or actually C# for Artists, the Art, Science, and Philosophy of Object-Oriented Programming, 2nd edition. I think there's links below for the books. Also, too, in ASP.NET, an integrated approach, I talk about doing this stuff, too. So employee BO, update employee. So let's set this one here. So employee list. Now how this will look when it prints will be a catastrophe, I'm sure, since we're just listing out the raw bytes. Dot picture. If it works at all. It might not work. I might have to like go back to the drawing board. Picture bytes. All we really want to check at this point is making sure that, you know, we're insert something, so when we run it, we'll check the database. Okay. And then we'll see what comes back. So save. And I think we're ready to test. Let's before going any further, let's pull over this. I'm going to execute the scripts. I'm not running that, so let's drop and create the database and then check the status of the database. Okay, so the database did not pause, so I think we're good to go. So we've updated the database. Well, we dropped and recreated the database. So let's minimize that, close that. Let's open up Management Studio. Let's check the database. Okay, employee training is there. Go to tables, table employee, right click, edit top 200 rows. So there we go. There are no picture data. That's really what we want to check. There's no picture data, and there's only 19 records. So let's close that. And okay, I'll slide the database out of the way. Back to the app, and I'm going to expand this and start. This is where you cross your fingers and your sphincter gets wired a little tight, but we'll see what happens. Okay, everything compiled fine. So cranking up, there we go. All right. So we have an error, which is fine. Let's see what we've got here. Oh, there are fewer columns in the insert statement than are values specified in the values clause. Okay, so where are we at here? Employee VO in business, business line 35, throwing from. Okay, good. That's an exception, and that's cool. So let me pause the video for 1 second, and I'll get back to you. Let me troubleshoot this problem, and I'll tell you what the fix was. Okay, I'm back. So whenever something like this happens, you need to go to the logs. So the logs on that last execution resulted in this error right here. So there's our entry, and it says there are fewer columns at data access DAO insert employee in Visual Studio. Okay, so now we have to go tracing through the to the DAO. So let's go to the DAO to the insert employee method. So we'll pull up Visual Studio, and we're in the employee DAO. Let's roll up to the insert employee. And they're absolutely right. No, let's see here. Okay, so we have, let's walk through this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, gender and picture would be 9. So let's go up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me go back down here. Maybe I'm missing something. So there's 10. Employee ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And on the insert, the employee ID is not used, so 9. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. So for the insert is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8. That's where the problem is. I forgot to put picture. So picture. There we go. Save. Now it'll work. Now before proceeding any further, since there was a dork up right in the thing, this is where you got to go back to the database. Let's go ahead and drop and create the database again. Let's minimize this. This is the sometimes how things roll, right? You won't really find, even though things compile fine, you're not going to find out if there's an issue. This is where your unit test would come in, right? You'd write a unit test, you would run it, and then it would notify you if something is not right. So let's go ahead and drop and create login. I'm going to do this one more time. Oh, you know what? Since I minimized, let me move this out of the way. This might be the issue here. Is that not running? That's not running. Okay. So I just want to make sure that I'm dropping this database before proceeding. Let's try that one more time. Okay. Still looks like it's having an issue. Let's go over here. Refresh. Okay, the employee training is not there. Now, let's recreate the database. So we're reinitializing the database with test data. Let's refresh and make sure the database is there. Okay, it's there. Let's move the database VM out of the way. And let's give this another whirl. Start. Now, that doesn't mean something else won't go wrong. It's running, compiling. Okay. So there we go. Now we have another issue. So invalid cast, unable to cast object of type system boolean. Oh, system boolean to type byte. So that's kind of interesting. There's obviously an error in my logic. So let me go back to fill in employee line 274. And once again, I'll pause this video and get right back to you. Okay, so I get the head up ass award for this particular mistake, right? That's what happens when you copy and paste. So notice that the get boolean, right? Column 6 in the database is a boolean is active, and I'm trying to cast a boolean to a byte, right? So I need to come down here and go 9. That's my mistake. Now let me just check I'm not dorking everything else up here. Let's go up here to update employee. Okay, that should be fine. So that's only on the database iDataReader method. So save that. You know what? Let's check the status of the database here. I'm going to open up the tables, take a look at employee, top 200 rows. So Laura Jean Richter looks like she has some binary data. So the insert appeared to work. Okay, so the insert appeared to work, but the retrieve did not, right? Because I was trying to cast the wrong thing. So this calls for a drop and recreate the database. So let me do that one more time. Dropping the employee training database. This might take a few attempts like the last time. Let me go ahead and minimize this and refresh. Employee training is still there. So let me do that one more time. Okay, now it should be gone. So refresh. And in fact, it is gone. So let's recreate the database. Okay, so everything's being recreated. I'm not going to bother with checking it because I know it'll be good. Now when we run this thing, we should, well, I'm not going to brag. Too early, right? So let's just see if this thing runs. Okay, so with no errors. Now what actually prints out when we print? You know, I don't think we'll actually see anything print out. The only reason why is I don't think I'm calling. I think I have to actually add like a call to employee get picture, right? So hit any key to continue. All right, so everything running is running fine, but we're not actually checking to see what the picture is, right? So I'm going to add 2 lines of code here. So on this last one, when I do a well, let's check the database, right? So there should be 3 records now. So we're going to expand. We're going to refresh first. Okay, now we're going to go to the employee training database. We're going to go to the tables. We're just going to check it on this end first. And in fact, we have, well, we deleted. So we deleted Laura Richter, right? So that's part of the thing. But these two, Corey Lee and Nancy Jo Coates, have a picture data. So they have binary data. So I think what I want to do is I'll just go ahead and leave that like that. Oops, I don't want to move that. I want to move the whole VM. So this should work fine. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do this. I'm going to say if vo.picture not equal to null, then console.writeLine picture vo.picture. And we'll see what happens. It's just going to be an array of bytes. And I guess, I don't know that I have to convert the two. I think this should work fine. So we'll write line the array of bytes. So what we'll see is, as we go through the employees, if they have a picture, it'll write out the bytes. So it might look ugly. So let's run it and see. Okay, so this could all go horribly wrong. Running this stuff in a console is not the way you really want to go. Okay, so hit any, return to continue. And, oh, haha. That's pretty funny. So evidently the toString method is not overridden. So let's see how I have to do this. if it's a byte array, I might have to cast it to a string to see what's in there, because it's really just printing out the type, right? So I'm going to pause the video, get a fix to this, and I'll be right back. All right, the solution is, this is because the to string is not overridden, right? And doesn't provide the correct thing. We have to go encoding dot default dot get string, and that will provide a string. And now let's run it and see what happens. Okay, here we go. Cross your fingers. We should see something that looks a little bit strange when we run this thing and it prints out those pictures. So that looks fine. That looks fine. So, okay. So 19, 23. The reason why this is 23 now, right, is because we've inserted twice, right? I've run this thing twice. So now let's hit return. And there we go. That's the picture data. It's just bytes, right? It's an image. It's raw, converted to ASCII / whatever the hell, right? It's just control characters and all kinds of weird code that doesn't have a printable representation on the console, right? So these pictures should be in a image box on a graphical front end. And so I'll leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed this installment. And I'll see you in the next one, where I will talk about probably transactional, or maybe connecting to 2 different databases. At this point, I'm not really sure. But if you want to see anything specific, hit me up at rick@pulpfreepress.com or leave a comment below. Also, too, subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. Tell your grandmother to get a YouTube account and subscribe. I need 1,000 subscribers. I'm trying to hit the 1,000 mark, and we're almost there. Thanks to you guys, and keep those positive comments coming. Keep the negative comments coming, for God's sakes. Even if you think these videos suck, just watch them anyway. I mean, just throw them up in the background, run them, let them go, hit subscribe, even if you don't like them. Anyway, trying to hit to 1,000. Like I say, if you got ideas, hit me an email at rick@pulpfreepress.com or leave a comment below. And I hope on some level you find these videos helpful. Have a great day.